Thank you. It's such an honor to be here in Elizabeth today. And I want to thank the superintendent, the members of the Board of Education, all of the educators and staff that are here today. It is such a pleasure to kick off the new year with you. As I was feeling the energy in the room this morning, I was thinking, you need to bottle some of this so that you'll have it for March when it's cold and you're getting ready to start testing those kids, and that you will need that extra boost to get them across this finish line. So I'm really delighted to be here. I want to add my words of congratulations to the superintendent, to all of you, for what you've accomplished so far. I was told that this is perhaps the highest performing urban district in New Jersey right now. Now, as Larry Leverett already said, we can't rest, because we still have more to go. And I think we should also acknowledge, as I know New Jersey pretty well, that being the highest performing urban district may not be that great a thing, when you consider the fact that many of the districts, the large urban districts, are controlled by the state of New Jersey, and some of them for many years. In fact, I would add, there's very little evidence that the state of New Jersey knows what to do to help those schools, because they are not getting out of their control. We have a political problem in education. The political problem is this: too often, those who know the least about education have the most say. We are far more likely to consult with politicians, with CEOs of corporations about what to do to fix schools than we are to consult with experienced educators who've actually done the work. I don't need that anymore. So, not surprisingly, we're not making the progress that we should. And not surprisingly, we continue to be a nation where a child's background does, to a large degree, determine how well they will do academically. So I want to applaud you for your focus on equity, but I want to acknowledge how hard that is. It's hard because everything in our society is moving in the opposite direction, towards inequity. We have inequity in wages. We have inequity in health outcomes. We have inequity in wealth. We have inequity in almost everything that matters in America today, and it's getting worse. So to say that we're going to do something in education that's different means that we're going to be going against the tide, against the stream. And if we don't understand how hard that is, we don't understand the nature of the challenge and why we can't rest on our laurels based on past accomplishments. There will be kids coming to you in the fall who did not pick up a book this summer, won't there? And kids who are coming to you who still don't have a stable place to live, and kids who are not eating on a regular basis, and kids like the ones we saw in the video who are working long hours because they have to help their families pay the bills. And anyone who does not recognize that what's happening in their lives outside of school is going to impact their outcomes and their experience in school does not get it. Doesn't get it. You don't have to be a rocket science to know hungry children don't do well in school. And children who don't have the support of a family that loves and can care for them will not do as well as those that do. But the commitment you've made to equity means that you want to be the place where not only doesn't a child's background determine what they can accomplish, but you want to be a place where the children will be assured that when they're with you, they will get the support and encouragement they need regardless of who they are. You are not going to be the place, and I know a lot of these places, that will say, you know what, we're really good with the kids who are highly motivated, with the kids whose parents are supporting them and who are actively involved. Those are the kids we're good with. I would say to those people, I say, you know what, if you're not good with them, you're in trouble. Because the parents are doing most of the work. Be a little bit like someone who said, you know, I want you to go to a doctor, but he's only good if you're healthy already. We judge our doctors based on how good they are with people who need help. And we've got to look at ourselves as educators. How good are we with the children who come to us needing more support? Not just those who have it all because their parents have been doing the work. We cannot ignore those kids. And we've got to make sure that they get pushed and challenged too. But equity means focusing like a laser on all of our kids, regardless of their backgrounds. So let me start with some definitions, because I think we use a term sometimes like equity and people can be confused about what it is. Equity is not equality. Not about treating everybody the same. Equity is about understanding that all of our kids are different. They come with different needs. They learn in different ways, different paces. To get clear about that, if you have more than one child, think about your own children. I have 5. The oldest is 31, the youngest is 2. They're all different. They're all different. The first one walked at 9 months. I was very proud, as if I had something to do with it. The fourth one did not walk till 15 months. I was worried. I thought she would crawl forever. They all walk fine now, they're walking all around. Even when they don't achieve average yearly progress in walking, it doesn't mean they'll be disabled. Some kids will read at 4, some may not read till 8. That's what the developmental psychologists show us. What we know about child development is at odds with what we're doing in education policy. When my 3rd child and the 4th child used to go to school, I would hold the hand of my son, the 3rd one, who was older, longer than my daughter. Because she was outgoing, she'd be ready to go. Daddy, I'm gone. My son was shy. I held his hand longer, not because I loved him more, but because he needed that. You will have children that need more time and attention, who won't get it as fast as others. You will have children who come to school needing more time, support, and attention than others. Equity is about understanding the differences and doing what you can to meet the needs of every child. That's what it is. It also means staying focused on outcomes. The outcomes that all parents want, we want our kids to be out of the house eventually, right? Independent, supporting themselves, hopefully leading good, fulfilling lives. In school, we want to make sure that all of our kids leave us better prepared for life. Not all will go to college. Not all are ready for college at 18. That's the truth. I meet the 18 years old all the time who are not ready for college, even though their parents are spending lots of money on them. What we want is kids who are able to make good decisions and who are on a path to goals. Problem right now is that we completely ignore the fact that to get our kids there, it requires more than focusing on test scores. Can't just focus on the test scores. If our kids get high test scores, but get strung out on drugs, have we succeeded? No. If they get high test scores and rob banks, have we succeeded? No. Even if they're the CEO of the bank. Because an education without ethics, an education without a sense of responsibility, is an education that leads to a person who will not lead a responsible life. I go to schools right now that in the name of raising test scores are taking away everything that's not on the test. Music's not on the test, they take away music. Art not on the test, they take away the art. Phys ed, recess, not on the test. So at a time when childhood obesity is the #1 health challenge facing our kids, I go to schools where recess has been cut. Guess what? I saw a study that recently said that eating lunch was good for test scores. I said, thank God. Thank God, they might take lunch too. Our kids need lunch and recess and art and music and science and history. They need a well-rounded education. That's what they need. Resist the impulse. Resist the pressure to teach to the test. Believe that if you can provide your kids with an enhanced learning environment, if you can tap into their potential to learn, if you can do this, get them excited about learning, your job will get much, much easier. Much easier. So equity is about all that. And if you ever get confused again, think about your own kids and what you want for them. Our goal should be to create schools that are good enough for our own kids. If that was the standard, guess what? I think it'd all be fine. We have good research now about what it takes to create high-performing schools that experience sustained success over time. It comes from research carried out in Chicago, where the University of Chicago has been studying school reform and trying to understand why some schools get better and many don't. And what the research says is there's 5 essential ingredients for school improvement. Look at the list and think about your school and ask yourself, where do we stack up on this list? The research says there's got to be a coherent instructional guidance system. What does that mean? It means it can't be every teacher doing their own thing. It means that it does take a team and a common approach. It means sometimes teachers plan lessons together and critique lessons together, because we can't just let teachers do it by themselves, because not everybody's a master teacher. It means that there's ongoing professional development. Ongoing, because teaching is intellectual work. And if you're not learning, what are you going to give to the kids? How are you going to stimulate? How are you going to challenge? We don't graduate from school master teachers, do we? No. If you become a master teacher, where do you become one? In the classroom. Here's the big challenge in most of our schools. In many of our schools, our teachers work in isolation from each other. We got highly effective teachers next door to people, not so much. What we've got to do is figure out ways to get people to work together so the expertise of those who are really good benefit those who are still developing. Great schools are bigger and greater than the sum of their parts. That's why it's so good that the custodians are here today. Where are the custodians? The clerical people, the counselors. It takes a team. One of the top performing schools I work with in California, every staff meeting is attended by the receptionist, the custodian, every member of the school staff. Every member. Why? Because the first person to encounter the parents is who? The receptionist. And if that person does not know how to speak to a parent, what happens? You got a parent who's pissed off. The custodian attends the staff meetings. Why? Because they want that person not just make the school beautiful and immaculate, they want the custodian to be a mentor for kids who don't have a father in their lives. And so at lunchtime, there he is, throwing a football at the kids in the playground. He doesn't get paid a dime more to do it, but he does it because he feels like a valued part of the team. We've got to make sure that we are building community among ourselves, that we are working together as a team, because I have never seen a high-performing school. Well, believe me, look at your data and ask yourself, among our highest achievers, how many of those children don't have parental support at home? It doesn't mean you see them regularly at school, because sometimes parental support shows up only at home. Let me ask this question. How many of you come from a family where neither of your parents graduated from college? Raise your hand. Look around the room, lots of folks. How many of you come from a family where neither parent graduated from high school? Raise your hands. Still some hands up. Mine too. Neither of my parents graduated from high school. They sent all 6 of us to college, the best college in the United States. Harvard, Brown, Columbia, Berkeley. Those of us who raised our hands are living proof your background should not determine your outcomes. But we should also know this, that when parents don't understand the system, especially immigrant parents, they may not know how to be effective advocates for their children. As a brand new student, my family moved from New York City to Long Island, hoping to get better schools. That's what my father hoped for, at least. But he was an immigrant, so he didn't understand the system. And he didn't understand the fact that when the school saw our names, and so they were Spanish, they would put us in special ed, because they equated not speaking English with a disability. We spoke English fine. They didn't even bother to ask us, can you speak English? Now, I was only in first grade, so I was fine. My brother Felipe said, you know what, Bobby, we're in the wrong class. My father, being an immigrant, said, behave yourself and do what you're told. He comes back the next day, Bobby, I'm definitely in the wrong class. I'm not doing any work. My father's getting mad. He said, Papa, ready to take action. Third day, Felipe comes back with a picture. He said, this is what I did today. So my father looks at the picture. He said, what's that? He said, that's all I did today. So now he's pissed. And now he thinks that maybe his son is right. My father was a police officer in New York City. So he said, maybe I better show up in uniform. So he goes to school in uniform. He says, I wanted to find out what class my sons are in. They said, don't worry, it's okay. We're a very good school system, you can trust us. He said, I want to see the class. Mr. Noguera said, it's okay? He said, no, I want to see it. So they take him reluctantly to see the class, and lo and behold, there's no learning going on, because special ed is not a place that's very special. It's a holding tank for kids they don't want to educate. So he immediately says, I want them out. They said, well, then they'll have to be tested. He said, test them. So both of us are tested. And according to their test, we're not special ed, we're gifted. Several years later, Felipe ends up at Harvard, I end up at Brown. What would have happened if my parents trusted the school? What would have happened if they, like many immigrant parents, simply deferred? We have to be the advocates for the children whose parents don't know how to navigate the system to make sure they're getting what they deserve. The research shows there's got to be a student-centered learning climate, a culture where the values and norms are conducive to learning. Culture matters. It shows up in how children treat each other. It shows up in how they conduct themselves. It shows up in the teacher's lounge, in what the conversation is like. It shows up at the end of the day when you see some people running out the door faster than the kids. Schools with a strong, positive culture do better than schools with a dysfunctional culture. Always do. But here's the challenge. A culture cannot be imposed on a school. Cultures develop organically. They develop through buy-in. They develop through a shared vision and a common sense of purpose and internal accountability. Internal accountability is far more important than external accountability. It's when we are accountable to each other, when we understand why we are here, that schools improve. So creating a culture where all kids feel respected, where all adults feel respected, is so critical to outcomes. Finally, the research says leadership always matters. But it's not walking around with a baseball bat. Too many people watch Lean On Me and they think that's the leadership model. No, it's shared leadership. It's about making sure there's enough trust in the school so that when the principal's not around, other people step up and take initiative, because everyone knows how things should be done. And when that happens, schools improve because, again, we're all on the same page. That's what the research shows. Ask yourself now, how strong are we in these areas? Where should we focus our attention? What should we be working on? Because good schools continue to strive to get better and better. They don't coast, they don't rest on their laurels. We need a framework for equity. Equity can't just be a slogan. We've seen what happens when we rely on slogans to drive our work. No child left behind. Great slogan, isn't it? Except what? We're leaving lots of kids behind. You know the ironic thing about that slogan? The slogan came from the Children's Defense Fund, not the Bush administration. But when Marion Wright Edelman came up with the slogan, "Leave no child behind," she had something else in mind. It wasn't just about test scores. It was about nutrition and health and all the other things that kids need. Equity can't just be a slogan we use. It's got to show up in our practices. And what does that have to include? It has to include a focus on child development. What is developmentally appropriate for a 4th grader, for a 7th grader, for a 12th grader? And are our practices conducive with who they are? It has to show and be influenced by the research coming out of neuroscience. Research that is showing us that the brain, rather than being fixed, is elastic. It is constantly growing and developing well into adulthood if stimulated. That means what? That means that mindset matters. That means rather than telling kids, you did that work, you must be very smart, we tell the kid, you did that work, it's a sign of how hard you worked. Because if our kids believe it's their effort that will produce results rather than innate ability, they will apply themselves. And third, the research on equity says it's got to be rooted in understanding of who our kids are. What are their lives like when they're not with us? Who are the people that influence them? Their family, their peers, the community. Kids don't just learn in school. The thing we've got to know is, how do they learn when they're not with us? What do they learn when they're not with us? How do they use language? How do they problem solve? Think for a moment about how a child learns to play a video game. Do they download the lecture first? Or do they get out there and start playing? They learn by doing, don't they? They learn through their mistakes, don't they? Sometimes in a video game you die, but you get to come back. And you get to keep coming back. And if you get good at it, what happens? You master the game. You learn through mastery. Ask yourself this now. Do we give our kids a chance to learn by doing? Or is there a lot of passive learning going on? Or are they just sitting and listening? The least effective way to learn is to sit and listen. Do we give our kids a chance to learn from their mistakes? Or are their mistakes held against them? Kids can't learn in an unsafe environment where making mistakes is not allowed. If a student knows, come 6 weeks into the semester, they've already failed your class, guess what? Some of them may stop trying. Some of them may stop showing up. How many of your kids can say, after they were with you, that they mastered the subject? I mastered fractions, I'm ready for algebra. I mastered the 5-paragraph essay, I'm ready for that research paper. I mastered my chemistry, I'm ready for physics. The reason why we have so many kids going to college today who are in remedial courses, effectively repeating high school, is because we don't focus nearly enough on mastery. We focus on seat time. We don't focus on evidence. My colleague Jeff Duncan Andrade wrote a very useful book called What a Coach Can Teach a Teacher. How many coaches are here today? Let's give it up for the coaches. How many music teachers or theater teachers or art teachers are here today? Together. What do these folks have in common? Anytime you teach a subject, that's performance-based, you understand that covering it is not good enough. You're constantly looking for the evidence. Do they know their lines? Can they perform? Do they know how to tackle? Can they shoot the free throws? And if they can't do it, what do? You can do it again, and again, and again, till you get it right. Because we can't simply say, I covered it, and then get them up there and they don't know their lines, and it's a big embarrassment. Because why? Because people who come to see the school play, who see kids who look like nuts, will say, you know what, we need a new theater teacher. Because these kids look like a mess up there. That standard, where we look at the performance of our kids as a reflection of us, has to show up in reading, in math, in history, in science. What the kids can do is a reflection of what we have taught them. We are very willing to take pride for the kids we send to Rutgers. Are we also willing to take responsibility for the kids we send to Rahway? They're ours too. I work at Rikers Island right now, the second largest penal institution in the world. Who do we incarcerate? Those we fail to educate. You know how many of those young people have IEPs? You know how many of those young people can't read? I was asked to speak to a group of them, about 600 young men at Rikers Island. They said, say something that will inspire these young men. I thought for weeks, what could I possibly say that will inspire these young men? So I got there they are, not looking too happy to see me. And I started out by saying this. I said, there is a conspiracy to keep you here. I said, there are towns in upstate New York that depend on you for their jobs. There are politicians who run for office to lock more of you up. I said, these guards that are here today get paid good salaries because of you. The guards are looking around like, who invited this guy? I said, the question now is, are you part of the conspiracy too? Because the whole system does not work, won't continue, unless you continue to make bad choices. Well, that got a lot of reaction. One kid got up and said, you know, I shouldn't even be here. I was set up. And he wanted to tell me about his case. I said, okay, we can't go that far. Another one said, you know, he had plans, what he could do when he got out. And we had a very lively discussion, so lively that the guard said, you know what, we need to end this, okay? Because we don't like to get him too riled up in here. So I thought I'd succeeded. I thought I'd got them thinking about what role and responsibility they play in their lives and what's going to happen to them. And as they were filing out of the room, a teacher came to me. She said, I want you to talk to that young man there. She said, he's brilliant. He's a natural mathematician. If he were to go back to school, he could easily become an engineer. So I go to shake his hand, and he says to me, I'm a Crip for life. And he keeps walking. And it made me know then, guess what? It takes more than one engaging lecture to get these kids to change a mindset that's been cultivated over years. You have them every day, don't you? You're the ones that got to be able to keep them out of prison. That may not sound like much of a goal, but in a nation where we are arresting more people than any other nation in the history of the world, let's at least make that a goal. Let's try to keep more of them out of prison. For us to get more kids excelling, because our goal should be excellence and equity. And we're writing a book right now that by focusing on equity, we can actually produce excellence in kids who come from single-parent households, in immigrant families, in kids in the projects and in the homeless shelters, because there's excellence there. But it takes a vision. It takes a vision where we not only look at teaching and learning, but we look at mentorship. Because kids, every child needs to have an adult who's looking out for them. It takes a focus on families and family engagement. It takes a focus on health and nutrition. It takes a focus on building partnerships. That's the kind of holistic vision that you're going to need in Elizabeth, because you are serving, as you saw in that film earlier, kids who come to school with unmet needs. And any of you who remembers Abraham Maslow, remember Abraham Maslow? And the hierarchy of human needs? What's at the base of the hierarchy? Food, shelter, safety, and love. And all you have to do is look at the kids that are not succeeding, who are not thriving, and you will see unmet needs. Let me be very clear about this. Poverty is not a learning disability. It is not. There is absolutely no evidence that kids who are poor cannot achieve, cannot excel under the right circumstances. However, when poverty is ignored, it can be disabling. When we ignore that hungry child, when we ignore the kid who we know is being abused and neglected at home, when we do nothing, we will not expect to see that child succeed. And so we need a bigger vision to do this work. It can't just be about achievement. It's got to be about health, well-being. It's got to be about emotional and psychological well-being, because that all affects outcomes. So we need to make sure that we understand how to implement equity. So I want to outline 10 principles and practices. And the first is in many ways the most important. It's about how we think about the kids. In schools where they're blaming the parents or blaming the kids, you never see progress. Why? Because the educators don't think it's their job. They're blaming someone else for it. And I go to schools where they're not just blaming the kids and the parents, they blame the board. They blame the governor. They blame global warming. They'll blame TV. They'll blame all kinds of things. And whenever I have people blaming something else, I know it means they're not focused on their work. They're pointing the finger. So what's the conversation like in your schools? How to keep people focused on the things we do control and not the things we don't control. Not to say that those things are irrelevant, but we may not be able to do much about them. So we've got to make sure that we are challenging expectations, that we are holding all stakeholders, including the kids and their parents, accountable, which takes work. I'll come back to it in a moment. And we've got to make sure that we keep looking at the data and ask ourselves, what does the data show? Who are we serving well? Who are we not serving? What do we know about the kids who are not making progress? We cannot do this work based on faith alone. We've got to have evidence. Evidence that what we're doing is actually having an impact. Secondly, we need people who are going to speak up. We need people who are going to be advocates for kids. And this is where it gets hard. Because sometimes you got to speak up with your own colleagues. Sometimes you got to say, you know what? I have a feeling that the kids in room 7 are not learning anything because the screams I hear coming out of that room suggest there's not a whole lot of learning going on. And I know every time I have them after you've had them, they are wild. And you have to figure out, how do we have that conversation? Respectfully. But just faking it won't get us where we need to be. I was visiting a district not far from me, a very affluent district that has lots of resources, that sends lots of their best students to the best colleges, but it has these deep disparities. So that if you're an African American Latino kid, you're not one of the kids likely to go to those top colleges. And I was talking to the principals there about the importance of people speaking up for equity. One of the principals raised his hand. He said, well, I've seen an example of what happens when people don't speak up. I said, why don't you share it with the group? He said, well, I'm new here. And I noticed that every day when the bell rings, there's a group of boys, African American boys, who linger in the hallways. They take their time going to class, and everyone seems to be fine with it. And sometimes they don't go to class at all, so I decided I'm gonna get them to go to class. So I started ushering them to class, and I discovered they were all going to class in the basement of the school. He said, I didn't even know we had classes in the basement. And that's when I discovered that the special ed classes were in the basement, and that there was no learning going on at all. It was like a play area. And the reason why they weren't going into the basement is because they were stigmatized. Everybody knew the dumb kids who were in the basement. My question to you is, who's in your basement? Who's in that room that you know those kids are not being well served? If we're not willing to speak up, if we're not willing to talk about it, we will not get better results. We don't get better results by faking it. We've got to be willing to confront it and challenge each other, again, respectfully. And we've got to look at our most vulnerable kids, the homeless kids, the recent immigrants, the kids we know have no support, the foster care kids, our males of color, increasingly at risk. We've got to focus like a target on those kids. I work with the school in the Bronx right now. Mount Haven Prep, any student coming to the high school with a criminal record gets a mentor before they get in trouble again. So you already got in trouble, we're gonna make sure you don't get in trouble again. And that mentor is gonna meet with you on a regular basis. That parent is gonna check in with your parents and check with your teachers. That mentor is gonna be your advocate in school. And because the kids have an advocate, the outcomes for those kids improve. It's nothing accidental, it's very deliberate. Third, we've got to embrace immigrant students and their culture. Because what the research shows is that when immigrant students feel included, when they feel like they're part of the school, when they understand not just the academics, but they understand what my colleague Lisa Delpy calls the codes of power, right? How to be successful in life. Immigrant kids can do as well as anyone else. As well as anyone else. In fact, research right now shows that our immigrant kids are some of our highest performers. You go to any of the top universities in the country, and you will find a disproportionate number of the undergraduates today are recent immigrants, and not just from Asia. They're coming from Latin America, they're coming from Africa, they're coming from Eastern Europe. Those are the immigrant kids, though, who are literate in their native language. Because when you're literate in your native language, learning English happens a lot faster. It's the kids who come who are not literate in the native language that we really have to watch out for. Those are the kids who can end up semi-literate in 2 languages, not fully learning English and losing their native language. Now they're really in trouble. What does it take? It takes teachers who know how to work with their skills, meet their needs, not just bilingual teachers, but math teachers and science teachers and history teachers, because the kids have to have access to the entire curriculum. And it takes a willingness to make sure that these kids understand that even as they are acculturating and becoming Americans, they're going to still need strong ties with their families. I was talking to a group of Vietnamese parents about the importance of parental involvement. This is in San Francisco. And I'm looking at one parent, and she's getting upset. I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "I'm a garment worker. I work 12 hours a day. And now you tell me I have to be involved in the school. I don't have time to be involved in the school." I said, "I thought they were professionals. I thought they knew what they were doing." I could understand her anguish. I said, "Well, in this country, sometimes when parents aren't watching, kids don't get what they need." She said, "You know what? I think my kids are learning something at school. You know what they're learning? Not to respect me. Because the longer they're there, the ruder they become." Now, many of us know that's part of adolescence for many kids, isn't it? Not just immigrant kids, a lot of American kids. In fact, part of what's happening is they're becoming Americans, right? They're learning how to sag their pants. They're learning to do all the things American kids do. What we've got to do is help to continue to build that relationship, maintain that relationship. When that happens, you can create schools like this one. This is a school in the Bronx School of Leadership and Technology. It's a school that serves SIFE students. That's an acronym. Students with interrupted formal education. That means they didn't even attend school in their home country. So they came to in this country, they can speak Spanish, but they can't read and write it. These kids at most schools are more likely to drop out than any other kid. But this school has a 98% graduation rate. 98% graduation rate. 40% of their students are undocumented. So that means not everybody's going to go to college. They can't qualify for financial aid. So you know what they do? They focus on careers in technology. They say, you may not go to college, but you will get a job because we will make sure you get the skills. I was talking to the young people at that school when I visited. I said, what makes this school special for you? They said, this school feels like family. It feels like family. We feel like we're supported. We look out for each other. I sat in as a group of teachers were meeting, planning lessons, and developing lessons together. They said no lesson gets it delivered to students unless it's been vetted by other teachers first. They leave nothing to chance. If you could do that in the South Bronx, you could do that in Elizabeth. You could do that anywhere in America if we stay focused. 4, we got to provide kids with clear guidance on what success looks like. Let me put it real clear. Kids who think they're going somewhere behave differently than kids who think they're going nowhere. I have a colleague did research on teen pregnancy. She asked the question, why is it that middle-class girls less likely to have babies as teenagers than low-income girls? You know what she finds through research? Sex is not the primary reason, though clearly sex is involved. Middle-class girls having sex too. But middle-class girls know something that low-income girls don't. You know what that is? Having a baby at 15 is not a good idea if you're going to college. It is the future aspiration that influences the decisions they make. Concrete aspirations, not abstract aspirations. I meet kids now, when I work with schools, and I work with schools all over the country. I was talking to a group of 7th graders in the Bronx. I asked, how many of you think you might one day end up going to prison? Every one of them raised their hand. And the most troubling thing about that was they were not afraid. They saw prison as a rite of passage. One of them told me, prison is where I will get my teeth fixed, because I can get dental work in prison. We need our kids to have clear goals and a plan for how to get there. That means we've got to teach our kids all the things they need to know. We need to show kids what good work looks like. Here's one thing I'd encourage all of you educators in the room to do today. When a child turns in work that is clearly slop, not meeting the standards, don't accept it, don't grade it, tell them revise. Tell them what they need to do to improve. The real teaching is in the feedback, not the grading. And the real learning is in the revision, not the first submission. We don't do our best work the first time. We need to break it down for our kids and let them know why you got to pull your pants up, why you got to take your hat off, when is it time to speak standard English, and why. Our kids have to be bicultural, bilingual. They have to be able to navigate any circumstance. They have to know how to go show up at a job interview and present themselves well. Otherwise, people will look at them and make judgments about them that might be rooted in stereotypes, but we know life isn't fair. And so we need to empower our kids with an understanding about how to navigate the world. When we do those things, we will see more of our kids successful and able to make it to the next level. Do you have Avid here in Elizabeth? Raise your hand if you're with Avid. Look at the people raising their hands. Ask them to share it with you, because Avid works. Don't limit it. Spread the knowledge, spread the information. Teaching kids how to be successful, breaking it down works for everyone, everyone. 5, you gotta build the partnerships with the parents. That's equity. Why? Because parents always matter. Your parents will either be your biggest allies or your biggest problem. Make them your ally. The research shows that when parents are reinforcing at home what's happening in school, kids will do better. The reason why all 6 of my siblings went to college is because of my parents, for the most part. We got in trouble at school. What do you think happened when we got home? More trouble. And they couldn't help us with the homework. They couldn't help us with the college applications, but they made it clear education was important. My father taught me this. He said, you can get a free education with a library card. Free education. And he read always. He was always reading. Get your parents to read to the kids. Get your parents to turn off the TV. Get your parents to get to school to kids on time. If they do their part, your job is easier. But for that to happen, you've got to know how to talk to parents. You got to know how to talk to them respectfully, not condescendingly. Can't use words that you know the parents don't understand. And you've got to have empathy. Empathy is not the same as pity. Empathy is saying, basically, I get it. I know how hard it is to raise kids. I tell you, I had 5. I have 5 of my own. And whenever I talk to the parent about how hard it is, I say, I know, it's hard. How many of you have perfect children? Anybody have perfect children? Okay, I didn't think so. I got a couple who think maybe. I thought that my last one, she's only 2. She's got the vocabulary of a 5-year-old. She can do yoga. She can do sign language. She uses words like exuberant. I said, well, this one is really going to be, totally gifted. She's gonna be so advanced. She's got a major flaw. You know what that is? She hits other kids on the playground. She's aggressive, and we're working on it. But guess what? None of them are perfect. None of them are perfect. And our work as educators is to help them to address their needs, whether they be the social or the emotional or the academic. That's what we've got to do, and that's what we got to be. We got to be an ally with the parents. Think about this. I rarely meet parents who want their kids to fail. Most parents want their kids to succeed, don't they? That means they want the same thing you want. That's the basis for the partnership. Let them know, I care about your children. Let's work together to make sure that the outcomes are better. If you can build that partnership, you will improve outcomes for your kids. 6, we got to make sure that our discipline practices are aligned with our educational goals. Discipline and punishment are not the same. Not the same. Discipline is about education. It's about making sure they learn a lesson. And you know you're doing it right if the behavior changes. If you're punishing the same kids over and over again, and the problems are getting worse, you know what that means? It means you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. I was at a school, to illustrate the point. Visiting a school in California, assistant principal showing me around. He's so proud of the renovations in the school, and he's taking me to the library and to the computer lab. We get to his office. There's a little boy about this tall waiting for him outside. And he turns to me and says, "You see that boy?" He said, "There's a prison cell in San Quentin waiting for that boy right now." I said, "How do you know that?" He said, "Well, his father's in prison, he's got a brother in prison, and he's a hellraiser. I can tell by the way he acts now, he's on the path to prison." I said, "Well, given what you know about this boy, what are you doing to keep him out of prison?" And he looks at me surprised, because he doesn't think that's his job. In fact, what he was about to do was to suspend the boy indefinitely and send the work home to his sick grandmother, effectively washing his hands. Why would we ever think that denying kids learning time is an effective form of discipline? Why? Suspension should be the last resort, not the only resort. I was at a school in Cleveland. Show you how insane this gets. I'm meeting with the principal. Boy comes in, he said, you've been truant. You've been cutting school. I said, "Yep." He says, "You can get 3 days suspension." Boy said, "Give me 5 this time. I want 5. He said, "Okay, smart, now I can get 5. So I'm looking, I said, "Wow, I've never seen this." I said, "You really think this is gonna work?" He said, "It's not gonna change behavior, but it's gonna get him out of my hair for 5 days. Ask yourself now, are we using discipline to change behavior, or are we using discipline to get rid of kids that we don't want to serve? If it's to change behavior, it's gonna look different. It's gonna first of all start by asking what's behind the behavior problem. Because if we don't address the cause, not the symptom, we won't ever get to it. How many of you have seen kids who act out of reading time because they can't read? How many of you have seen kids who act out because they're being abused or neglected at home? Thank you. How many of you have seen kids, they want to be put out of class. They don't want to be there. And we will oblige them, knowing full well that the longer they're out of class, the further behind they will fall. Guess what? The achievement gap and the discipline gap are the same thing. Who do we punish the most? The kids with the greatest needs. I was an elected school board member in Berkeley, California, and I always give my hat off to the school board members because I know several of you have been on the board for many years. I can only do one term. I can only do one term. I called it my sentence on the board. I remember about a month after being elected, someone threatened me and told me that they weren't going to vote for me next time. I said, "You will never have that opportunity again." But as a board member, we used to do the expulsion hearings. And we would have kids come before us, and we would have to decide on the cases. And the kids had always done something wrong, something terrible. And all you had to do was look at the case. And you would see the signs of trouble were there very early, and no one addressed them. And who are we expelling? Kids in foster care, kids in group homes, kids with IEPs. Guess what? Early intervention works better than late intervention, doesn't it? Whole lot better. So let me be clear about this. Lawrence Kohlberg psychologist writing about moral development in children, said the goal of discipline is to teach kids to do what's right even when we're not looking. That's the goal. That means what? That means focusing on character. That means focusing on values. Kids need to know kindness. They need to know respect. They need to know integrity. They need to know honesty, which means what? It means we've got to model it for them. And we've got to reinforce it. It's not good enough to have rules. I go to lots of schools, they have lots of rules of all the things you can't do. You got to teach them the things they should do. You got to make it proactive. And you've got to make sure that you walk the walk. If you want those kids to dress appropriately, how do you have to dress? Appropriately. If you want those kids to be on time, you better be there before them, right? If you don't want them eating in class, don't say it while you're stuffing your face, dude. Your kids are watching you all the time, aren't they? One teacher said, you know, my kids knew before my husband that I got my hair done. Your kids know if you have favorites. They know if you don't like them. They know if you're afraid of them. And they know if you wore the same shirt 2 days in a row. You are a role model, like it or not. So now we have to ask ourselves, are we ready to be role models? What are we modeling for these kids? Let me tell a story about this relationship and how vital it is to learning. I work with a school in Oakland, California. They have a brand new teacher there from Teach for America. You know about Teach for America, right? Well, she fits the profile. She's smart, comes from a good Ivy League school, she's idealistic, and she's totally overwhelmed because they have put her in the most challenging classroom in the school. So she comes to me, she says, I need some help with classroom management. No one's been willing to help me. Can you help me? Now, I don't even work there, but I said, sure. So I come to sit in her classroom, and after a few minutes there, it's clear the problem is much worse than she described. The whole room is in chaos. Kids are screaming. She's screaming. There's no teaching or learning going on. One of the students turns to me and says, can't you get rid of her? It's painful to watch. End of the class, I go to her, I said, wow, this is bad. She said, I need help. She said, I'm about to quit. Every day I leave with a bad headache. I said, don't quit. I said, let's go talk to the principal. So together we go see the principal. And she describes what's happening in her classroom, and he listens. And then he says to her, you're a professional, deal with it. And then I speak up, I said, listen, if you don't help her, she's gonna quit. And it's only March, you'll have to get a sub for the rest of the year. Well, that gets to him. He said, I don't want that. He said, I have a veteran teacher who's great with kids, and she's available as a sub. She's retired now. I'm gonna bring her back for 2 days. I can only afford 2 days, but I'm gonna ask her to take over your classroom, and you're gonna watch her work with the kids. So both the new teacher and I think this sounds like a good idea. We're interested in what this veteran teacher can do. So the next day she shows up. She's an older woman, got a big coat, big bag, walks slowly. But the kids can tell right away, the real thing is here today. She gets right into the lesson. Kids are on task. New teacher and I are shocked. No screaming, no yelling. Kids at their desk, wow, this is like remarkable. But not long into her lesson, she sees two girls talking. So she stops what she's doing. She turns to one of them, she says, young lady, when I'm speaking, I want you to be quiet. She turns to go right on the board, and the girl says under her breath, bitch. You've heard that one before? But it wasn't a direct bitch. It was way down here, bitch. You can pretend it was a belch or a fart or something else, let it slide if you wanted to. But she's not letting it slide, so she turns to the girl, she says, young lady, do I look like your mother? The whole class does that. And right away the girl says, you don't look anything like my mother. She says, well, whenever you speak to me, I want you to think about your mother. And then she goes right back to the lesson. New teacher turns to me and says, how did she know that that would work? Think about it now. What does the veteran teacher know that the new teacher doesn't? And where did she learn it? Did she get that one in grad school? No, she didn't get that in grad school, did she? This teacher has a black belt in teaching. Because teaching is much more like the martial arts. And guess what? You don't get the black belt through seniority, do you? No, you got to master the craft. She's mastered the craft. So what does she know? She knows she can't let this slide, can't she? What happens if she lets that one comment slide? Bitches are coming out all over now. Why? Because everybody heard it. And they said, if you put up with that, you need more. Because you're the kind of person who'll take it. So she's got to nip it in the bud quickly. But how does she nip it in the bud? She doesn't escalate it. She doesn't say, what did you call me? Your mama's a... No, she doesn't go there. Why? Because she knows this is a child. And she's got to make sure that the child understands that you are working with a responsible adult with moral authority. Moral authority. Moral authority is not about your title, it's about the relationship. So she doesn't get on the phone and call for a dean. She said, I need help, they're cursing at me in here. Why? Because if one little bitch calls her to get help, that means she can't run this class. She's got to deal with this. And they want to know how you're going to deal with this. So what does she do? She says, speak to me the way you would your mother. And you know what else is implied there? Even if you talk to your mother that way, you ain't talking to me that way. And guess what? The kids actually respond. They calm down because they're actually happy to be taught by an adult who knows what the hell they're doing. They said, thank God, we finally got an adult who knows how to handle this class. That's one of the kids said to me, I'm so glad we got that teacher. Because the veteran teacher knows something the new teacher doesn't. You know what that is? The kids know better. She doesn't have to cite the rules. The rules against cursing. Do the kids know it's against the rules to curse at teachers? Sure they do. What they don't know is if you know what to do about it when they do it. That's what they don't know. And if the only response you have is to put them out, then they say, thank you very much, I'm free now. She also knows this. Getting right back to the math, right back to the work is ultimately the most effective form of classroom management. Because kids who are academically engaged will be less likely to disrupt. My question to you and Elizabeth, who are your black belt teachers? Who are the masters of the craft? I know we got some masters in here. And if you say, look, I'm still a green belt, I'm working, that's okay. That's okay. But if you want to find out who the masters are, go ask the kids. They'll tell you. Who are the teachers that challenge me? Who are the teachers I know I got to be prepared for? Who are the teachers that will not let me get away with anything less than the best? Ask the kids who they are and then go watch them at work. We got to reduce the isolation of our teachers and be willing to continue to learn, to master this craft. 7, we got to rethink remediation. There is absolutely no evidence that by going slow, you will ever catch up. Ever catch up. You want to get your kids to catch up, you've got to focus on diagnosing the learning needs. That's the big problem right now with the way we do assessment. We assess the kids in the spring, and we give you the results when you no longer have the kids. That's what policymakers do. Because they're using assessment as a weapon, not as a tool. We need to assess, because we need to know how they're doing. But guess what? Assessments should be an ongoing process. The work is telling you how they're doing. You don't have to wait till the state exams. We can't do faith-based teaching. We say, I hope they do well. We should know. We should be looking at the work all the time. We can see who's making progress and who's not. So we need to make sure that we are looking closely at the data, that we are intervening early, that we get kids who need extra time. I've heard you have lots of schools with extended time. Get them in there. Some kids need more time. They need much more time, much more support. And when possible, we've got to personalize the learning for those kids, to give them the attention they need. We heard the stories from the film of kids who were struggling, who ended up succeeding. It's possible if we get to know our kids and if we meet the needs. We've got to make sure that we evaluate what we do. Right? If you got Avid, is it working? What does the data show? If you've got preschool, is it working? I was at a school, they said, we got reading recovery. I said, well, how many readers did you recover? I said, we never asked that question. And intervention only works if the evidence says it does. Look at the evidence and keep asking yourself, are we addressing the needs of our kids? Are we making progress? One of the schools I work with is a school in Massachusetts, Brockton High School. Brockton High School is the largest school in the state of Massachusetts, over 4,000 kids. It's the only urban high school in the state that gets a level 1 rating by the state. All the other schools that get level 1 are in affluent communities. Brockton High gets level 1 because they did something radical in Brockton in 2001. They decided that every teacher would be a teacher of literacy. They looked at the data from the results of their test. They said, you know what, the big problem here is our kids cannot read and write at grade level. Too many kids come into high school reading at 3rd and 4th grade level. Instead of blaming the middle schools and the elementary schools, they said, these are our kids. A group of veteran teachers came together with the principal and said, what we'll take is we've got to train each other to teach literacy across the content. Literacy in science, literacy in math, literacy in art. The principal says, that's a great idea, but I have the money to make them do it. She said, we'll do it ourselves, we'll volunteer. She said, well, I don't have the time, so you're going to have to do it on your own time. I said, that's fine, and we will work with the willing. Because Massachusetts had the highest standards in the country. Massachusetts were a country right now, it would be one of the highest performing countries in the world. So they started training each other with the willing. 2 years later, when the state exams were given, 60% of the kids passed. They got everyone's attention because it was projected that over 50% would fail and not be allowed to graduate. So more teachers saw a volunteer and said, okay, literacy seems to work, I'll do it, I'll get trained. 6 years later, 80% kids passed. 10 years later, 95% of the kids in Brockton passed. 1/3 of the senior class qualified for a public scholarship at any public university in California, in Massachusetts. Look at the picture. 1/3 African American, 1/3 Latino, 1/3 low-income white students, matches the demographics of the school. There are no gimmicks. They focused on the needs of the kids. They aligned their practices with those needs. And because of it, the school not only did that in 2012, they did even more in 2013, 2014. The principal of the school just called me a few weeks ago. She said, Pedro, I'm going to let you know right now, I'm retiring from the school because you talk about my school, people might come looking for me, they're not going to see me here. I said, well, are you worried about how your school will do? She said, no. I said, because it's not about me, it's the teachers who own this work. They're the ones who do this, not me. So the school is still on its road. We got to learn from success. We got to follow what works. And part of what works is getting help. Schools can't do it all by themselves. Who are your partners? Hospitals can be a partner. The universities can be partners. Businesses can be partners. Churches can be partners. Who do you need to work with to address the issues that you know you can't take on already, that you can't impact? Who can you work with to get the parents more involved? Think holistically about this work. It'll make the job easier. Last but not least, I saw a quote earlier that said it, I'll say it again. We've got to be willing to teach the way our kids learn instead of expecting them to learn the way we teach. The only way that you can do differentiated instruction is if you teach the way your kids learn. You've got to be able to do this. Look at this classroom. This is a middle school in East Los Angeles, Hollenbeck Middle School, and it's a math class, a 90-minute math class. And lo and behold, those kids are up out of their seats. And they're not running around. They're actively involved in learning. You don't see one kid taking notes and the other kids copying. They're all working together because this teacher, who's in the back talking to me, is a master of the craft. She's only been teaching for 6 years. She's already got the black belt. She's so good, she could do yoga in the corner if she wanted to. Because the kids are in control. The kids are on task. The kids are teaching each other. If a kid doesn't get it, one student helps them. You know what? The highest form of learning is your ability to teach someone else. And as they work together and learn together, they're learning how to cooperate. They're learning impulse control. They're learning how to defer gratification. You know what the research shows about social and emotional skills? Those are the traits that if our kids get them, will help them be successful throughout life. Read How Children Succeed by Paul Tuff. It's all about the importance of those non-cognitive skills. Now, some people look at a classroom like that and they get scared. Because they know that if this doesn't go right, chaos is right around the corner, right? So again, ask yourself, who are the teachers that know how to do this? Who are the teachers that know how to actively engage the kids? Engagement is the secret. That's the key. And engagement is cognitive, it is behavioral, and it is emotional. The kids have to understand it, the kids have to show it, but they also have to care. They have to believe it matters. So what does this teacher do to make it matter? She knows every one of those kids. And because she's able to get them on task, she can give more time and attention to kids who need help and let the others keep going. And because she understands the importance of keeping them on task, the kids don't do homework. You know why? No one to help them with homework at home. They do the work in class. She says, I've got to see who can do it. I've got to see who's getting it, who's not getting it, because I've got to make sure that the kids who are not getting it get retaught quickly. And retaught does not mean I'm going to say it louder now or slower. It means I'm going to do it differently because you didn't get it the first way. Now these kids are lucky because when they graduate from Hollenbeck Middle School, which is in a community that's very poor, mostly immigrant, all Latino, they get to go to Garfield High School. And Garfield High School is the school where Jaime Escalante taught. And for those of you who don't remember, Jaime Escalante was that crazy Bolivian engineer who decided to become a math teacher, who knew that his kids in East LA could do advanced placement calculus. The first people to oppose him were his colleagues who said, not these kids. These kids are the children of factory workers and gardeners. They say, watch me. So his kids passed the test. And the Educational Testing Service, ETS, not far from here, thinks, of course, they cheated. So they require the kids to be retested. They get retested and the kids pass again. So now everybody's paying attention. Whoa, what's this guy doing? What's Escalante got up his sleeve? So they send in researchers to study. They come in from Stanford and from Berkeley to look at his methods. The researchers come away saying, we don't see anything special here about his methods. It's math. Because they didn't understand what he was doing. He called it teaching them ganas. What are ganas? Anybody? What's ganas? The desire to learn, the hunger to learn. That's what he was giving these kids, to work hard. They'd come in on Saturdays, they'd stay late. He got them to see where calculus is used. He took them to aeronautical labs because he knew that part of what he had to counter was the stereotype that all they could be were janitors and factory workers. He said, this is why you need calculus. And he got them to see. He said, you are the descendants of people who built pyramids. Calculus is in your heritage. Well, he died 2 years ago. And there was this great outpouring of former students who came to his funeral. People who are now engineers and doctors and lawyers and professionals. It was amazing to see. One of those people is a superintendent I work with in Inglewood, California. And she said everything they say about Escalante is true. I was a student. He got me to perform at a much higher level. I was a weak man student until I got to his class. I said, well, what was the secret? She said, the secret was the relationship. The relationship. She said, he used to show up at my soccer games. He said, he would come to your soccer games? I said, yeah, but not to cheer me on. He would stand on the sideline and say, I can't play soccer, go back to math. Great teachers go the extra mile for their kids. Great teachers inspire hope in their kids. Great teachers get their kids to believe that great things are possible for them. Elizabeth has great teachers. I can see it. I can feel the energy here. And I started by saying this. I'd say right now, the biggest problem we face in education is political. It's political. The politics, the policies are really at odds with everything we know. With everything we know about the research. There's an article today in the New York Post questioning the value of preschool. It's like, wow, is that where we are? Questioning the value of preschool? They said there's no evidence that going to preschool will lead to higher outcomes. I said, you know what? There's no evidence that eating your vegetables and exercise will prevent you from dying either. But eat vegetables and exercise anyway. This mindset that the only thing that matters are the test scores is what's killing education today. Hugging your children may not raise the test scores, but some of your kids need a hug. Hug them anyway. Engaging your parents and holding a conference where you get them involved, that may not immediately raise test scores, but do it anyway. Education is also about doing what we know to be right. It's always been true. You know this? For the longest time in this country, it was common for the kindergarten teacher to have a piano in the classroom and to know how to play it too. Why? Because we understood way back then that music was a foundation for learning. It still is. We need a holistic vision for education. We need a deep commitment to these children. Equity is about that commitment. And equity is what will make it possible for this district to be an example, not just for New Jersey, but for the entire nation. I believe Elizabeth can be that example for the country. And I wish you all the very best this year. Thank you very much. We're going to try something very radical here. In a room of 2,700 people, we're going to try to do some questions and answers. And there are people with mics, your assistant superintendents out there ready. So, I think we can only take a few, but if you got a question or comment, please keep it short, but raise your hand. We have one? Okay, here we go. We got one over here. Please say your name and where you teach and what you teach.
My name is Lisa Ruffo. I teach 3rd grade at School 22. One of the questions I had was about something that you referenced earlier about this culture and the climate of the building. A lot of schools sometimes have difficulty getting everybody involved in that buy into it, from custodians on, like you said. So how do you begin to establish that type of culture and climate?
Good question. Important question. Thank you. The most important ingredient around building that culture is buy-in. We need buy-in around the vision and around our plan for what we're doing, which means the people in leadership have to be able to stand before the staff, explain what we're doing, and now receive your input. And ask for your ideas and your suggestions. Because if they can't do that, you shouldn't follow them. Would you follow someone who just told you, do what I say because I'm in charge? No. That's not how you get buy-in. You get buy-in by deliberating on what we're doing. Because teachers might see something the principal doesn't see. And together we might be able to come up with a better plan. Because cultures are rooted in shared practices and shared values and norms. If we get everybody on the same page, this is how we're going to do things. We're going to be able to move together. So it's the work of working towards buy-in that starts to produce the common culture. So I'd encourage you to be willing to put the time into that. It's a hand there in the middle. The lime green shirts.
Okay, we have a question over here from school
number 23, Dr. Noguera.
A few of us at School 23 wanted to know, how can we motivate underperforming students as well as underperforming teachers in our school?
Good question. We have a lot of research now on resilience. Now, some people equate grit. You're familiar with this? A lot of people using this term grit, which is good, but grit and resilience are not the same. The difference is this. The people emphasizing grit and persistence, which is very important, don't acknowledge that some kids have real obstacles that are preventing them from performing at a higher level. Resilience is about recognizing the obstacles and helping kids come up with strategies for addressing those, right? So part of what we got to do is really get to know the kids, tap into what their interests are, build on their strengths. Build on the strengths. We have too many kids, the only thing they've ever experienced in school is failure. When you fail at something, there's a natural human tendency to pull away from it. And so you have kids who say, I don't like reading, because they're not bad readers, or they don't like math. How many adults here say, I don't like math? How many adults here don't like math? Look around the room. Ask yourself, when did you first come to the conclusion you don't like math? What happened to you? Some people say, you know, it's fractions. We had to multiply those fractions. That did me in. What we've got to do is to build confidence in our kids by building on strengths so they'll be more willing to take risk and more willing to try new things. So if you can do those things, it's going to help. That's why I spent time talking about engagement, because that's so key to starting to turn that mindset around in children. We spent a lot more time on that, but I would say that would be the focus, building on strengths, not focusing on deficits. I see another hand.
Dr. Noguera, I'm Eric Price from school number 12.
But I can't see you, Eric.
I'm over here on your left.
Oh, hey, Eric, okay.
How you doing? I believe what you spoke to foremost was to develop this and to truly acquire equity in schools. It's about developing the relationships within the school and within the community. The key factor that you touched upon that often I feel that policymakers forget about is parents. And so what I'm curious about is how we could develop a stronger foundation, a stronger relationship with the parents to draw them in and make them want to show up at the school, make them be part of the education, even help them learn the skills to help us continue the education at home.
Very good question. I like what you said, particularly at the end, because what we really are after is them reinforcing at home, right? That's what we're after. So the critical ingredient here is trust. It's about trust, building trust with parents. Now you've also got to be able to, you got a practical issue, is communication. How do I reach the parents? And some parents, let's face it, their cell phones are changing every few weeks, right? So you got to make sure that you know how to reach them. I would say this, it would really help if the first point of contact is not a call home about how bad the child is. That is, if we can start by getting to know them. So here's a strategy I learned from a kindergarten teacher. She says when she does a parent-teacher conference, she starts the conference with this statement to the parent. You know more about your child than I do. What can you tell me about your son or daughter to help me be a better teacher for your child? She said the reaction of parents is remarkable because they quickly realize, wow, you acknowledge that I know my child and that we need to work together. And that's what the partnership is about. It's about helping to build trust based on respect and based upon a recognition that we both care about the kids. So there's, I would say, one secret thing you do. I mean, first of all, don't get too hung up on getting parents to school. Some parents are working so hard that getting to school is very difficult. My parents were almost never at school, and I was happy for that. The most important form of parental involvement is what they do at home. However, it is also important that if you do want them to come to school, get the kids to perform, get the kids to present their work. Parents want to see their kids and what they can do. Use the kids as a way to get the parents in. And if you can do those things, it'll help to build this partnership. But it doesn't happen overnight. It's work. Thank you.
Right here in the center aisle.
Hello.
How are you? Beverly Patterson, School 6.
Beverly.
Quick question. Your speech is very inspiring. Are you going to leave us with a website or some resources so that we can continue some of your philosophies?
Superintendent's way ahead of you. Getting a lot of resources from me and from others that she's going to be putting on the website and making available to the schools. Let me be clear about this. If I gave you the impression that any of this work I've described is easy, I apologize. It's not easy. The schools that are making a difference are working hard, right? But we need to learn from those examples about what success looks like. And I'd be happy to continue working with you and sharing that information.
Rashid Barber, Social Studies, School 9, right over here.
Raheem.
Now we have a question for
there you go,
everyone here. We've all come here to answer the call, okay? All means all, right? Equity among all the staff, students. So, we have the brains, we have the heart, we have the courage, but what we need is the hope. Can you tell me, describe to us that vision of the future when we reach that plateau and that's the road of equity?
Well, let me say this. I'm on Twitter, and when I came in today, I saw you all coming with this energy. I started tweeting, and first of all, I praised the superintendent, and I said, look at what you're doing here. Build everybody up, get ready for here. This is a starting point. Get people inspired, right? You ever heard the saying, feeding the teachers or they'll eat the children? They feed you today. Maybe not literally, but hopefully with good ideas and lots of support. But I would say you need to keep that going throughout the year. I was serious about March. You know, think about March. No more vacations coming up. It's still cold, right? That's when it's really hard. So we need to keep building each other. And the way to keep inspiring ourselves is by building community. When I started Brockton High School in Massachusetts, they didn't get there in 1 year. They didn't get there in 5 years. It took them 10 years to become a level 1 school. Incremental progress is real. So we want to keep looking at what we're doing, keep refining what we're doing, get better and better. That's what it takes. That's the yellow brick road.
I'm Stormy of the Madison Academy. I've been around quite a while, so I have one question for you. Parents who come in did not experience a good school years when they went to school, and they project that onto their students to the point of possibly embarrassing their students because they don't have a message in their children. Is there a way to diffuse this negative attitude to try to bring them back on our side?
Very good question. And to be clear, it's not easy. Some of the parents are affected by the trouble school they were flashback of their bad memories and their bad experiences. And then project that back onto you and onto their child. So what we've got to do is win them over with constantly letting them know how much we care about their child. If the parents believe we love their children, care about their children, it's going to make it a lot easier to build that alliance. Because the vast majority, and I'll say it again, want their children to succeed. I'll tell you this, I have met crack-addicted parents who still want their kids to succeed. So let's never lose sight that that's what parents want. If we can show them that's what we want, we can build the alliance. Yes.
Hi, my name is Adam Rodriguez. I'm over in the Edison Academy. My question for you is, on starting day 1, what advice can you give to us teachers to be more empathetic and culturally responsive to students?
Good question. It is very important, you got to use your discretion to do this, to let the kids know that you're not just a teacher, you're a community, that you also have experienced challenges in your life, and you have to deal with obstacles that you have to overcome. Share something about yourself. Obviously, be careful what you share. Or anything going out there that you'll be uncomfortable later on, right? But if you let the kids know, I too have had to experience hardship. And this is what I've had to do. That can help to let the kids know that you get it, right? That it's not easy. We talk a lot about culturally responsive education, and ultimately what that means is understanding how to make the material we're teaching relevant and meaningful to the students. That's got to happen whether we're teaching math, or science, or English literature. For that to happen, though, we've got to know and understand how to build a connection in the material. I'll give you one example. One of my students, he teaches English literature in high school. Before he introduces Hamlet, he brings in Tupac. He says because Tupac, the kids can relate to, and Tupac, like Hamlet, had issues with his mom. And then before he has him read Hamlet, he says, you know what? Hamlet thought that his mother and his uncle plotted together to kill his father. And that's why Hamlet is depressed. Can the kids understand treachery? Can the kids understand why a child in that situation might be depressed? Those kinds of issues transcend our cultural differences. Great teachers can teach kids anything. Do not believe that only African-American kids can learn about African-American history, or Latino kids have to learn about that. That's bull. A great teacher can find a way to make it come to life if they know who they're teaching and understand how to build connections with them.
From School 23, and my question is to you. How do you deal with students that come from problem situations and difficult home lives, and they come to you very angry? How do you reach those children without recommending them to the child's team or some type of anger program? How do you approach them to not have them so angry in your classroom and relate to you?
Okay, so let me say this. I started my career working in a school that served angry kids who had been kicked out of the regular schools, an alternative school in California. And what I found consistently, first of all, some kids have issues that go beyond the skills of a teacher. Right? Now you're looking at a psychologist here already. Sometimes you gotta know when it's time to bring in a school psychologist or a social worker because you don't have the time or the skills to deal with what's going on here. Right? But beyond that, the key is the relationship building. If you can establish the relationship with that student and let them know, I want you to succeed, I'm invested in your success. Some of that anger that comes from prior experiences or life experiences is going to melt away. Not every child, but let's be clear, some kids are carrying big burdens that can't just be easily resolved. And that's why we need to think about this by bringing in other resources too. And let me just say this, don't be afraid. I hope this is the kind of place where if as a teacher you say, I need help with this, that's not used against you. That this is a place where help will come, and we can problem solve together about how to approach challenges involving our kids. Yes?
I am Michelle Charles. I am from school number 20. And I am here to ask this question. What kind of advice or recommendation can you give us as teachers so that we can achieve more?
Sounds like a Trinidad in there, no? I know, but that food's there too. I would say this, the main advice I would give to teachers is this. First, take care of yourself. Take care of yourself because this work drains you. It drains you physically, it drains you emotionally, it drains you psychologically. So you gotta do things to replenish yourself. Meditate, pray, whatever it is, exercise. Because if you're too sick, you're not going to do the work. Secondly, work together. Work collaboratively with your colleagues. The work is easier when we don't do it in isolation, but when we work and problem solve together. And third, I would say, focus in on those relationships with your children, your students. If you can do those three things, the work will get easier. Doesn't get easy, that's easier.
One last question over here.
Last question.
One last question over here. Hi, my name is Sabine Lewis from School 7, and if you had the opportunity to talk with some of our students, what would you be most interested in discussing with them?
Good question. I do a lot of talking with kids. Because I would say that kids will tell you the truth. Right now, if you had the courage, you could ask your kids, tell me which classroom you're learning in and which classroom you're not learning in. And they'll let you know. When I talk to the kids, I talk a lot about what are their interests, and I try to tap into their motivations. Because those are the things that allow me to figure out how to build connection with them. One of my daughters, I have 3 daughters. The older daughter, she does work in schools with literacy, coaching teachers, but she starts by working with the kids to show the teachers how to reach the kids. And she does activities that get the kids writing very quickly. And she does them by focusing on their lives, who they are. I sat in on an activity where she had a group of kids and she said, the simple question was, tell me about your name and where your name came from. Something as simple as that. And in almost every case, the child's name, they were named after a grandmother, they were named after a relative. She had one girl in the class who was very rude and disruptive. When it was her time, she said, what's your name? She said, my name is Alcazay. She said, that's a very unusual name. Where did it come from? She said, my mother was an alcoholic. And when I was born, her brothers and sisters named me Alcazay because they said I'm a child of an alcoholic. She started to cry because her relationship with her mother was so bad. Not only did her behavior change, everybody in the room's behavior changed. Suddenly, they were building empathy in a room amongst kids, a community in a room where they were now ready to become a community of learners. So I would say if you can find ways to tap into that, that's what I always try to do when I work with kids. Tap into their experiences that will give me a sense of how to reach them and teach them. I wish you all the best. Have a great year.